Thanks for joining us as we take a closer look at the life and work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, otherwise known as
Expensive grace.
Expensive grace?
Expensive grace.
Yes, when Christian discipleship costs you everything, including your life, it does get expensive. I'm John Newton, science fiction author, and I'm joined today by
Eric from Your Brother in Christ.
the Baldy over here. There is a Velcro
Feels
warning.
very good.
He needs to stay far away from Velcro. So if you do have any of that, please remove it from your premises, because even over the airwaves, it will get stuck on his head, I'm sure. The goal of this live stream is to prime the pump for next week's review of Angel Studios' movie Bonhoeffer, due to hit theaters this Friday, November 22nd, 3 days from now. If we get an idea of who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was, what his world was like, and what his challenges were that he faced, then we'll view the movie with a much greater appreciation. Much like learning about the Reconquista or the Muslim invasion and subjugation of Spain or the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, that will make my novel, The Healing Stone, come alive. So we're doing kind of the same thing with you. We're getting to know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was, and maybe even get a chance to be challenged by some of the things that he said and did. Now, would you totally miss out on the movie or on anything historical if you don't do some digging like this? No, of course not. But
we don't know. We haven't seen the movie yet.
That's true. That's true.
So we don't know how close they are to it.
Yeah, this might be totally off.
That's Angel Studios. I know, but do it decent.
They do. I'm looking forward to it. You think they'll pull it off?
I think so. I hope so. We'll find out. If not, we'll tell them.
I know. So far, we've given them good ratings for the two movies that we've reviewed. We did The Shift.
Mm-hmm.
And what else did we do recently? Angel Studios. I'm drawing a blank. I should know this. We just did a review on it.
I don't know. We've done so many.
We have. So anyway, it's right here because I'm going to totally forget about it, but I'm going to put it up here afterwards. This is the other one that we did that is really on my mind, but I'm not telling you anyway.
Woo.
Okay, so this would also be a good time to put in a plug. Speaking of my novel, if you enjoy history or novels where Christians stand up for righteousness, like what happens in this movie, you might like my novel coming out early next year. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. But if you want a pre-release copy, check out the link in the description of this video. I'll be sure to get you one. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was this guy? You only see part of his face here. And let's put up the whole thing here. Okay, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was born in 1906 and died in 1945. We'll get to that in a moment. He was a German Lutheran pastor, theologian, and anti-Nazi dissident, known for his outspoken resistance of Adolf Hitler's regime. He was a key figure in the Confessing Church denomination, which opposed Nazification of German Protestant churches. Bonhoeffer is perhaps best known for his book, The Cost of Discipleship, which we'll be taking a look at here in a bit. And it's also where he emphasized the concept of costly grace versus cheap grace, advocating true Christian discipleship requiring sacrifice and action and not just belief. During World War II, Bonhoeffer became involved in the German resistance, participating in plots to assassinate Hitler. So I put out a poll numbering a bunch of things about him. That was one of the things that was numbered about him, and the correct answer was all of the above, because all of that was true. His opposition to Nazi ideology, particularly to its anti-Semitic policies, and his role in the resistance led to his arrest in 1943. He was executed in 1945, just weeks before the war ended.
So close.
Bonhoeffer's writings and life continue to influence Christian thought, especially regarding the relationship between faith and political activism. His mother and the two governesses, now he didn't come from a Christian family necessarily. You would think that a guy like this, may have come from that. No, he, even though his great-grandfather and his grandfather on his mother's side were both theologians, and his mother was a devout Christian, and the two governesses who raised him were also Christian, pretty much everybody else in his family was a nominal Christian or cultural Christians, including his father, who Karl Bonhoeffer, who was the most famous psychiatrist in Germany for the first half of the 20th century. Diedrich was raised in a family of academics, all geniuses. They were connected socially, culturally, and extraordinary. This guy was, I don't know if you'd say he was a protege or he was well-rounded in not only the education that he had, and it was real education, which just wasn't rubber stamped. He also was a musician. He started to dabble in, when he first got into theology, you think, well, he's a pastor, he's getting into it. He didn't go into theology directly. He was going to go into the sciences or other academics like his brothers did, because everybody excelled in his family. But he diverged into theology and was looking at pursuing it just academically, just like his brothers was. It was just all mental. It's just all in the mind. Then he traveled here to the U.S. and he was influenced. He went to New York and he saw what happened to segregation there, especially with the blacks. And he said, this isn't right. And he spent some time there. He spent some time in the South. And he said, man, I'm glad this kind of stuff doesn't happen in Germany. He went back to Germany, and guess who gets elected? Adolf Hitler. And he says, whoa, this looks oddly familiar. And so that's partly where the resistance part stood up. And we're going to take a look at the trailer now. And before we do, though, I should probably take a look at the comments that are here, because I see that there are some. Okay, good. Christian Sodium Channel. I took your advice, brother. I'm not just going to be looking at the Cost of Discipleship. We will also be looking at Theory of Stupidity later, which sounds like a good title for a Babylon Bee video.
The Theory of Stupidity.
Yes, it's not.
It's a catchy title.
It's not. And yeah, we got a lot of.
Oh, that's the answer to your question.
Cabrini.
The other one we did.
I knew it.
Oh, Cabrini.
It was like
Cabrini was
right
really
there,
good.
right there. Yeah, Cabrini. And that was a good one. We gave that double thumbs up. I think both excelled. And the movie possibly to turn him into an ecumenical machine gun wielding John Wick vampire.
I doubt
I
it.
I heard there was some flack. If you look up the movie on Wikipedia, of course, that's the source of all sources, and we know what they say is entirely correct and not leaning towards any direction whatsoever. I'm leaning towards my left, by the way. Yeah, it did point out some controversy. Not a whole lot of praise for it. It says, they said this and this, and it centers on Christian nationalism. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see when we go see the movie if it actually does any of that.
I'm not sure this really centers too much on Christian nationalism, more like not going along with the Nazis.
Well, I know. So this is the kind of guy who you get different camps want to claim him as one of theirs. And so some of that has been done on some of the earlier biographies, more liberal leaning theology, but what he was following with neo-Orthodoxism, we'll take a look at that here in a minute. It was an answer to neo-Orthodox, to liberal theology. So
just real quick, for those of you that don't know much about him, in other words, he is the type of guy that everyone claims that they would have been like during World War II in Germany.
Yeah.
That's this guy
that's
in real
question.
life.
Would you? I don't know if you would ever know if you would stand up against a regime like that, against evil, against totalitarianism, until you're really tried, until your metal is put to the fire. I mean, we would all like to say, yeah, sure, I'd do that, but how many of us?
There are so many people that would claim that I would definitely do that, but nope. They'll go right along with it, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, I don't. Yeah. I think that as human beings, you look at Peter. Peter said, "Not I, Lord," and then 3 times.
Whoops. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter and Judas really do have a lot of similarities.
Yeah,
in what
and
they
even
did.
then, Jesus said, "On this rock I will build my church,"
Well,
talking about his faith. But still, Peter then was a bit of the leader of the disciples. So,
well, I think that it shows two faces of the same. Both of them betrayed Jesus in a different way, but one repented, one didn't. One took the penalty on themselves, and one accepted grace.
right.
And I think
that's a good point.
Really shows, to tell you the truth, it shows what Judas could have become. But yeah, it is what it is.
Okay, so and Christian Sodium Channel says maybe he's not the John Wick. He's not the John Wick we want, but he's the John Wick we deserve. And so Thomas Hall said, "I have better hopes for Angel Studios than that."
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, again, they've done so good so far, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and
as long as they stay true.
Let me ask Christian Sodium Channel. We haven't set it up for this, but would you be willing? And Eric's going to say, "Call in." I would be, and you're shaking your head no.
You can go ahead and do it. I don't know how good it will be.
Okay, we can try. But if you do, because when we get to the theory of stupidity, I'm probably classify under there because I just don't know. I have the theory. I'm just ignorant, so I have not studied it like you have. So that would be a good one to look at. So and let me just make sure. I say it's ironic that he had blonde hair and blue eyes. Yeah, he was. You know what? He was the. I don't know if you'd say the ideal of the Aryan model going on here, but with his ability, everything from academics to music to theology across the board, with his father's influence too, the Nazis probably said, "We want this guy." You know, it's like claiming Joe Rogan or something like that. We want this guy on our side, type of deal. And yeah, he looks like it. You can't tell, black and white, blonde. But in the movie, I think he actually had darker hair. But in the movie, he does look more blonde. The character who plays him. And anti-Nazi equals Christian nationalism to certain fools, it seems.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did see one of the people in Angel Studios he had a German accent, and he was talking about Bonhoeffer fighting several things. And one of the things he mentioned was fighting nationalism. That's probably a huge discussion for another time, to say what role, if any, does nationalism have in Christianity, or is it anathema that the Christians are not really connected to anything? And that's part of the discussion that we're going to have a little bit later here too, but not getting too deep into it. And then he said he dearly hold the crown of martyr along with Stephen and the apostles and the prophets. Yeah, we don't see the whole picture. We don't know. God knows the whole picture, but probably from what we understood from other people's testimonial and the fact that he did this, we could only aspire to be able to stand up like this guy did. And here's a question. We're regularly challenged to stand up for Christ, to defend him. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but you'd say that in
Pretty
some
often.
cases, right? Depending on who you talk to. You'd say daily?
I'd say daily.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what your situation is, but
well, I mean, even for people that have normal jobs, I mean, that's still every day they've got to make that decision. Where are they going to stand? Where are they going to go with it? It might not be as direct.
No.
In your face, but it's definitely a question that does arise. What are you going to do? Is this where the Lord has you there for a reason? What's that reason going to be? And are you going to fail?
That's a good question. Sometimes not very clear or very obvious what our individual callings are. But live for him in every circumstance. Live like today's the last day. All those things. Thomas Hall said Hitler was trying to bring the church in Germany under Nazi control. True, and I believe you do see that in the movie.
Oh, you definitely see that Hitler's writings.
And you do see that in Bonhoeffer's writings too.
Yeah, he had no respect for Hitler, had no respect for the church.
We have some letters. One of his books are letters and papers from prison. That's the name of it. So, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Many churches went along with it. Perhaps this is part of why Germany is largely atheist today. Yeah, there was that, and liberal theology, German rationalism in the 19th century did have a lot of influence on that as well. So
there are a lot of factors that go into it. Not
True.
just one, but contributing, possibly.
So I am going to, there's a movie trailer that I'm going to put up. Now, this is Angel Studios. I believe there's not going to be any copyright issues with this. I test as much as we can. We'll see what happens with it. I believe it's all under wraps. I think we're good. If you watch this video later and there's a cut right here, that's because I needed to cut it out.
Something's coming. Something unstoppable.
Look around you, my friend. How much light do you see?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because the visions of me creeping left its seeds when I was sleeping.
Hate comes in every color.
And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sun.
We have devised a plot to assassinate the Führer.
You will go to England as our spy.
Churchill sees Germany as a whole. He's afraid that a bomb traced to England would mean invasion or worse.
Invasion? Invasion? My country was invaded from within.
And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made.
Hi, Hitler!
And the sign flashed out his warning. And the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words on the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls and whispered in the sun.
I'm ready to meet my destiny.
Of silence.
So that's coming out this Friday. I think it looks pretty powerful.
Looks pretty good.
I mean, his. What are your thoughts of the trailer?
I thought it was well done. I thought they played it off. I hope they keep the historical narrative as much as possible. It looks like they might have, but it's a question, if you have this sort of level of corruption, and this is currently in the United States, this is far beyond what we currently see. But this level of concentration camps, you have people actively being taken from homes and put into camps. You have people who have been discriminated against, and at the same time, I mean, we've already mentioned it on here. I mean, him himself, would have been perfectly fine if he would have kept his mouth shut. He would have been perfectly fine. He had blonde hair, blue eyes.
Oh my god,
he was the ideal.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah,
he had everything.
He'd be like a poster child.
He could have. Yeah, he could become a poster child. He could have had it all under that regime, but when it came down to it, it was anti-Christian. It was not right, and it could not be followed.
No, and he was 39 years old when he died, and I think he had just married a younger woman, much younger woman. But he, even after the fall of Germany, well, I don't know, in Nuremberg trials, what he would have been going through then at the time, but there's the promise, the hope of the future. There's this world versus the next. What are you willing to give up? And like Sodium Christian Sodium Channel.
Chills.
Chills. Yeah. I have to confess, it's the first time I've seen that trailer all the way through. And
very well done.
Yeah. Good. I wasn't too sure about the choice of Sound of Silence, but I think it's really fitting, especially when you have like the statues falling and Nazi Germany is renaming what's going on in the church and everything.
No, I think it's a great example because you have a large group of people who did stay silent, who could have had the same convictions and said no to this horrendous activity that was going on, but chose to stay silent.
Yeah, that's the other part of that music too, is to say all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And this is an example of a good man who did do something.
Yep. He did what everyone claims to want to do in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. So I have take that off, and I don't know about Paul Simon's Beliefs. The great song. Yeah, that song's been around for a while. People bowed and prayed to the neon god they made.
Yep.
And Hitler became that. So we've got to be, I think, vigilant in looking out for this. So whenever you read a Christian writer like C.S. Lewis, it would be good to know what he's responding to. So sometimes you look at, like I would read, not the Screwtape Letters, but the science fiction trilogy.
Silent Planet?
Yeah, the trilogy. When you read those, you may not realize that some of the stuff he's talking about, because you have Weston is talking about, oh, this great, glorious, we're going to be doing all this great stuff. If you don't realize that C.S. Lewis is responding to the philosophies of his day through that book, you may not realize where, because it kind of just sounds a little skew right now. But if you understand where this is coming from, it's a different picture. And if you read some of C.K. Chesterton's work, which influenced C.S. Lewis, then it starts putting a different tone on it. In the same way, we have that with Bonhoeffer. He was a proponent of what was called neo-orthodoxy. Now, this is not the same, this is not related to Eastern Orthodoxy or the Orthodox Church at all. What this is saying is, in especially Germany, there is, I'm going to put this small screen again because I just keep going back and forth. In Germany, in the 1800s, there was a rationalism that was bleeding into the church. And being rational is not bad. There's nothing wrong with being rational, but so it's a little bit of a misnomer. But what it was saying was the Bible is not accurate. It's not real. It talks about the Hittites. The Hittites never existed. It talks about the splitting of the Red Sea. Yes, splitting of the Red Sea, the miracles of Jesus. These were really either just metaphors or, we could just treat them as good, nice stories right now. But what happened was there was a reaction, a response to that. By the way, you had said, what about the Hittite language?
Oh, that we know better now.
We know better.
We know that they actually did exist, and you can go get classes in learning their language and how to talk.
Yes,
like
we looked
them.
it up. Was it Yale or
my goodness,
Harvard or one of the Ivy League?
Talk about putting your foot in your mouth.
Yeah. So they were saying they didn't exist. Now we know they're one of the three great empires of the Bronze Age, and we're there for the Bronze Age collapse. So yes,
that'd be almost like someone saying, "Well, the United States never really existed between, it was just Russia and China."
Yeah, just all symbolism.
It's like all symbolism. It's like
no. So the same thing happened with Bonhoeffer. He was responding to this kind of liberal theology of the day. It was neo-orthodoxy. So that was one thing it was responding to, was that. And the other thing was liberal theology. The other thing it was responding to was World War I and World War II. World War I took these great ideals they had at the turn of the century, of the 20th century, coming in, and they had these glory days, all these great ideas, much like we did when the year 2000 came around. we had all these great things we're going to have. Look at all this advancement we made in the last century. But what happened instead is they didn't have that. Because of Clausewitz and other stuff that was going on at the time, they ended up straight headlong into World War I. And all their ideals were shattered. It also happened with the sinking of the Titanic. All this great, glorious utopia that we're going to be getting into because of our thought, our thinking, our science and technology is going to bring us all this future, this great future. I've heard that story before, right? It doesn't work without God. Science is great. Technology is good, generally speaking. Depends who else speak that. But without God, you end up, what was one of the most advanced nations in the world, definitely by discipline and by academics, and it was the pinnacle, a lot of what society was, and that was Germany. Germany was very well advanced.
World War One.
Yeah, pre-World War One.
Afterwards, not so much.
Yeah, because they were recovering after World War One. But so a lot of these ideals have been shattered. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer was responding a lot to that. Now we're talking about just his theology and his way of thinking. And then from that, you can understand why he did what he did with Germany there. So if you watch the movie, you understand the man a little bit better. This could possibly help with that. So the tenets of neo-orthodoxy, then now we know what responding to. The tenets were transcendence of God. God is not just something that we can rationally think with our own mind. He goes beyond that. Now, we can't conceive of aspects of God. He's omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and all these other attributes of God we can classify. But he transcends beyond what we're knowing. So you can't necessarily put God in a box in a laboratory. And that's what a lot of German rationalism was doing at the time. So you had that aspect, and also sin and grace. The impact of sin in people's lives is tremendous. The grace that he has, he's especially talked about cheap grace versus costly grace. We'll get to that in a minute. But the weight of sin and the pure delight of grace and what grace can give us afterwards can't just be brushed away. And that was being brushed away by German rationalism and liberal theology. And we do see today's liberal theology is an offspring, springs back from that. Is, well, all we basically have when we strip away the miracles, when we strip away the authority of Scripture, when we strip all those other things again, is just be nice to your neighbor. We just have the Sermon on the Mount, and that's it. There's really not a whole lot else. Maybe the Good Samaritan. There's not a whole lot left. You don't look at the Old Testament. You don't look at Revelation. It's like, how do you handle Revelation in that case? So with
definitely not. That's the bloodiest book in the Bible.
Yeah,
it is by definition.
And they would say, well, Jesus. Some liberal theologians will say Jesus in that. Jesus is love. Well, who was the one who delivered the message of Revelation to John? That was Jesus.
That was Jesus.
The seven is so cool. Did Jesus write any, and you can talk to Muslims about this too, did Jesus write any epistles? The 7 books, the 7 letters in Revelation are from him.
Yep.
So, yes, he did. So we also have another tenet is ethical action in a broken world. So just remember where Diedrich came from. He just like his brothers, they were all pursuing their own little section of academia and being these preeminent people in their line of discipline. He chose theology and says, well, I'm just going to be the best theologian around, basically. And then God got a hold of his heart and turned him around. And one of those things that was turned around is saying, yes, we can. The theology is good. It's important. But unless we walk the walk, that's going to happen. If you ever read his book, Cost of Discipleship, and some of the other works like that, puts entirely new weight on his words. When you're listening to the words of a martyr. Yeah. This is a guy who lived it out.
Yeah, didn't only talk. He walked the walk right to the gallows.
Oof, yes, definitely. So now let's take a look at the cost of discipleship. What was what was going on in that book? Bonhoeffer wrote several books, and you can find the link for some of the books, some of the more popular books, in the description of this video, plus a well-written book, a biography by Eric Metaxas. That's also in the description of this video. The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a profound theological work that emphasizes the demanding nature of true Christian discipleship. The book contrasts what Bonhoeffer calls cheap grace and costly grace. So what is the definition of those two? Cheap grace, then, refers to cheap grace, not supernatural, superficial faith that requires little from believers, treating God's grace as an excuse for moral complacency. It is grace without discipleship.
Paul wrote about this a lot.
Yes, he did. It is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ. That's a quote from him. So we know that grace is free. It's freely given by God. But at the same time, Jesus requires how much from us?
Everything.
Our entire lives, everything. And you can look at Bonhoeffer as an example for that, what he gave up for that. And even like the disciples. How many of the 12 apostles, well, there's more than 12 apostles, but how many of the original 12 disciples that became apostles ended up in luxury?
None of them.
None of them had yachts?
None of them had yachts. None of them lived. None of them ruled cities. None of them led armies.
Well, they at least retired in peace, surrounded by their families in luxury. No.
Most of them died.
Most of them died.
By execution. And gruesome executions, too. They're quite well described.
Yeah.
And, 11 of them did. And then you had John, which we're not really sure how John eventually died. Either he died in exile or he was boiled alive in oil when he got back home. So, back to the mainland. So, I mean, it's either way, it's bad. Bad ending as far as the worldly standards go.
But Jesus calls us to that.
Yep. Not a very good selling point from the secular world standpoint.
No. And if you look at men like that, we cannot shrink from little costs like, I might ruin my reputation if I say something. I might not be able to get this job. I might lose my job. I might lose this relationship, whatever the deal is. People might make fun of me. Wham. One thing about the execution of Bonhoeffer, and I see a couple of comments here. I'm going to get to this in a second. If you read or know, and I do not know if they showed this in the movie, they did show the gallows. He died by hanging. Spoiler.
I actually didn't know that one. Made the joke. I did not know that.
Well, the way that the Nazis did it, they I believe at this point they knew that they were losing. I think this might have been after D-Day. The writings on the wall, they're getting desperate, and the ones that are following the Fuhrer at this point, I guess, would be the most insane because it's done, it's over with.
There's only ones left.
And so when they go to execute him, he's not the only one that was executed on that day. They hung him, and then they revived him. They hung him again, revived him, over and over until he died. So there was I believe possibly other forms of torture that were in there as well. This is not just a quick, execution.
Nope.
Nothing about this was nice. And he was in a concentration camp at the time too. So going to the chat, Sodium Christian channel, the Christian Sodium channel. I got to get your name right. Weimar Republic was a fascinating lesson. Yeah, we do well if we do not forget that part of history. It's from German theologians in the 1800s that created things like JPE and dating books like Daniel Late, etc., because of the supernatural surely can't exist because we can define everything. We can qualify everything. we would know there's science. They believed in the turn of the century that physics is now coming to an end because we have discovered everything there is to discover. And there was the idea, the belief that if you knew the position and velocity of all particles in the system, you can tell with certainty, absolute certainty, what's going to happen. And then Heisenberg blew that out of the water. When he got to subatomic particles, he said, you cannot know both the velocity and position, I believe it's a position.
Velocity and position, yes.
Of an electron, subatomic particle. Because once you know one, you affect the other, and so forth. So it became, there's certain part we can't know. We influence what's going on here. Only God knows all this. And so, do you know what he means by the J, P, and E?
No.
Okay. This is for, I believe it's all the Pentateuch. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas. The Jehovah, Yahweh group, the P, the priestly, and the E, I forgot who the E was on this. But anyway, basically, they try to deconstruct, especially Genesis, and say, oh, wait a minute. This has been rewritten several times. You have several authors that are having influence on this. And it looks like this came from the Jehovah group, and this came from the priestly group, and this came from this other group. And, oh, look, I can color code this, and this is how everything pieces together. Oh, I know this all. I figured it out. Yeah, secret knowledge.
A lot of secret knowledge. If anyone tells you they've got the secret knowledge, run.
Yeah, and we're still fighting some of this today with some, because it's been bled into our culture to question, like Daniel and other books. We're saying, look, we have more background than that. That explains why so-called free grace pastor Steven Anderson recently said Bonhoeffer is in hell. Oh my gosh. For saying there is such thing as cheap grace, yet look at how many free gracers act like Nazis.
Yeah.
Act like Nazis. Yeah, that's true. And we're in the middle of doing this, and this is good stuff here. We'll get back to this in a minute. Sick irony. Yes. Was it Jesus? Was that the J?
Maybe it might have been,
no,
but I
Old
think
Testament.
that was copied.
About the thing good thing I have my Heisenberg compensator. Yeah, that is on the shelf over there next to the flux capacitor. So both of those are good. So the idea of cheap grace is that we can often say, so you have salvation freely given to you by God through Jesus Christ. Okay, you got that now. Here it is. He's offered it. He's also requiring our lives in exchange for it, but it's free. How can it be free and do that? Because the only way that we can receive it is if we give the life.
Well, the part they're missing is the repentance part.
Well, yeah, and that goes with it. You can't, it's sort of like being plugged into the grid. You can have your house wired and everything like that and maybe given a house, but unless you plug it in, that electricity is not going to work. No. And even the electric company says, hey, listen, I'm going to give this to you freely, but it's got to be plugged in. There's things that's got to have to be done to set it up. Costly grace, and that's that other part here. Costly grace comes with a price. It is the grace that calls Christians to follow Christ and bear the weight of discipleship. You have to follow. He was saying that it is the first thing that Christ said to Peter, and it was the last thing that Christ said to Peter. Follow me. The weight of discipleship, it involves sacrifice, obedience, and personal transformation as it demands an active commitment to living out the teachings of Christ, especially in a hostile world. So here's the rub. Is it faith or is it works? Are we saved by faith or are we saved by what we do? Is it saved by works?
We're saved by faith.
We're saved by faith through grace. It's almost
the result of it is just like if I'm going out and working in a field and planting plants and growing plants, I'm going to have a crop because I did the work, because I was faithful to it. There you go. So again, if you've had the grace accepted to you, the result of that is the works happening naturally.
Right.
because of the relationship we have with Christ. And
Right.
he's very keen on having that relationship with Christ, not just being, okay, well, I got my goodie points for this week. I'm going to go do my own thing and come back and get my goodie points next week.
Every relationship we have costs us something. We sacrifice at least a little for someone else. If we don't sacrifice in our relationships with other people, no one's going to want to be around us. We're going to lose all relationships. And the same thing as our relationship with God. It does cost us something. So the book...
the closer you are, the more it costs.
Yeah, that's true.
A scale. I mean, my relationship with my wife cost me a lot more than my relationship with like my coworker.
And as it costs you daily, that relationship deepens.
Yes, definitely.
So you get to be an old man like me and married to, I was going to say an old woman, but I had to be very careful because I'm being recorded.
I was like, it's getting on dangerous.
I'm married to a beautiful, wise woman, although she doesn't mind if I say she's old because we're both old together. You know, there's a sweetness that's there of a relationship that's been around for a long time. We can't buy into the world that says, oh, it just in love with that infatuation that lasts, I don't know, months maybe, and then wears off, and you go from relationship to relationship to relationship, and you define love as that infatuation. That's not it. That's like taking a seedling and saying, yeah, that was great, okay, and I want a new one, and pulling it out, and never having the oak tree that can develop from that.
Okay, I just want to make one thing clear. You did call your wife old. Did you lock your studio door? I just want to make sure I'm not in the splash zone.
I'm going to be fine. She's never going to watch this. We're fine. In his book, The Cost of Discipleship, this is going to be my last recording, by the way, just to let you guys know. The cost.
Once your wife sees this, oh yeah,
be fine. In his book, The Cost of Discipleship, it's structured around Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And Bonhoeffer interprets the teachings as a call to radical, countercultural living. He argues that following Christ involves not only belief, but also action, serving others, standing up for justice, and also enduring suffering. Now, we got to be careful that sometimes as evangelical Christians, if you are one, I don't know if you are one or not, but we can sometimes say it's all theology, and so it looks so much hard on the theology and forget the other aspect that goes with this as well, and that is taking care of the poor, feeding, giving, all that other kind of stuff that goes with it. These really are hand in hand, go together. Bonhoeffer also delves into the importance of the Christian community and role in helping other believers and to live out their faith authentically. Ultimately, the cost of discipleship challenges Christians to embrace hardships of living as true followers of Christ, rejecting temptation, to pursue an easy, comfortable faith, and dude lived it out.
Yeah, like I said, he didn't only
practice what he
talk
preached.
The talk here. He didn't just say, okay, you guys go do this. This is really important. You guys make sure you go do this. I'm going to sit back here nice and cozy. No. He took the bull by the horns.
He did. And now we're going to get into what the Christian Sodium channel suggested and tackling, and I'm going to be doing it lightly because there's so much material here. We cannot delve into it all together. But that is the theory of stupidity. So what is this all about? The theory of stupidity sounds like I said, like earlier, it sounds like the title of a Babylon Bee video.
It sounds like an epic video.
I'd
click on it. Put a picture of Muhammad on it, and you're good to go.
Oh, well, you might want to use that as one of your titles.
That should be a really good one.
Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity highlights the dangers of groupthink and moral addiction that can allow, moral abdication that can allow societies to fall prey to oppressive ideologies. Can you think of anything that has happened recently or is currently happening where our society is falling prey to groupthink on any kind of weird theology or ideology?
What is a Woman is a great example. Another one would be just look at TikTok and you get examples left and right. primarily got the current movement, which is called the 4B movement, that a bunch of TikTok women are participating in, and I just sit back and say, I got a wife, I'm good. You guys want to remove themselves from the gene pool.
I do feel bad, and I do have boys that are in want of a good woman.
I would not recommend these sort of women.
No. But the pool of selection is becoming diminishingly small, and we've had long, hard talks with my boys about what things were like back in the Stone Ages for me, before social media, swipe left, swipe right, that type of thing, where you actually had to get the courage up and go up and ask a girl for her phone number. Things have changed quite a bit, and so maybe that falls
quite a bit.
What's that?
Dumbed it down.
Now
you might want to hit the comments.
Okay. Catching up a little bit. Thomas Hall said, "He who seeks to keep his life will lose it, and he who gives up his life for my sake will gain it." That is so true.
The my sake part is very critical, though.
And I think Thomas would have. I mean, he would have definitely put that in there too. So that's critical. Not just like I'm going to submit suicide. No, you're giving your life up to Christ, and look for the ways that we can. I mean, seek that out. I mean, how can I give up my life? It is so much more important. And he said, "What river?
What sea?
What sea?"
That is right up there with what is a woman. That needs to be asked a lot.
What river? What sea? Are you talking about the
Palestinian thing, from the river to the sea, but they don't know what river and they don't know what sea, and they don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. I've seen some of those.
Stupidity. And then they saw not too long ago, they had a...
Where's Ukraine on the map?
Where's Ukraine on the map? They had it was at a Santa thing at a mall, and they got the Palestinian group there going, Jesus was Palestinian. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. Palestine didn't even exist back then.
Nope. He wasn't Arab either. You know what his lineage is. We actually have that in the Bible.
He was a Jew from Judea.
Yeah. So this is one of those few points where it's like, okay, maybe I will check out the genealogy in Matthew. Maybe there's some good part. Yeah, there we go. It's like, that starts to kick in at that point.
Yeah, but that's what he's referring to. Okay. It's just the fact they can't answer. They'll go to these rallies, they'll go chant this going down the street, but they don't know, one, it's called genocide. Two, they don't know what it actually means. What river, what sea, what's going on.
So that does come into the first part of the theory of stupidity as a social problem. This is one of those things with that. So then the Christian Sodium channel said, there is a lovely and short video from the channel Sprouts giving fun little sketches about it. About this?
Assuming the river to the sea.
Or no, it might
be.
It might the theory of stupidity. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
It's one of the problems with reading the chat. It's kind of things are kind of out of sync. We can't really tell exactly sometimes which is going. So the second aspect of the theory of stupidity is stupidity versus evil. Now, what does this entail?
I'm so glad you asked.
I'm so glad I asked. And there's a couple of other things that are up there too. While evil is willfully destructive, stupidity is even more dangerous because it is often unconscious and indifferent. Stupid people, Bonhoeffer says, are easily manipulated and cannot be reasoned with. They become agents of evil. That's the banality of evil, but without the awareness or intent that characterizes malicious actions. Well, okay, so let's look at abortion. Not knowing, I've gotten into some debates lately, and I might as well be banging my head on a brick wall. Asking the question, I just asked the simple question, when does life begin? And I was met with all sorts of questions. One was like, well, 2 million to 300,000 years ago, human life began. Dude, this. And one other person said it's always began because an egg and a sperm are alive, right? So life continually propagates, it's never really stopped. Okay, we're talking about this being this. So I wonder if there is some willful ignorance on some people's part that want to, because wanting to.
Just don't think about it. Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah, because if you do, it's
going back to
the truth is awful.
Going back to the screw tape letters. Let them think they know enough of science to be learned, but yet not enough to actually know the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Another aspect of it is stupidity is lack of inner independence. So what does that mean? No, not the next one yet. What does that mean? Too many screens.
Not relying on each other.
No. Stupidity is lack of independence. Bonhoeffer suggests a stupid person is one who has surrendered their inner independence, allowing their thinking to be dictated by external forces. They adopt opinions and attitudes of others without critical reflection. I see this a lot on the latest thing.
I see it a lot with the Muslims.
Whatever comes up, people, put on their avatar for their social media. It's like, keep calm, stay alive. 2 weeks to slow the curve. Slow the spread. Thank you. Slow the curve. Spread. All those little monikers that they put on there.
He's losing his mind slowly as we progress in this.
Yes.
I'm just slowly see, not as fast as Joe Biden, but you can slowly see it.
Stop it. I'm just in fear.
We'll have to release him back to the wild here shortly.
Stop it. Overcoming stupidity. No, that is not an action of it. But you see how there's groupthink that'll go on. Certain groups tend to have more of a groupthink mentality. That kinship is far more important, than truth. Whereas independent thinkers say, listen, the truth is more important because the truth is going to set us free. And that's where we need to be. Now, the other one is you saw it as it came up, overcoming stupidity. Bonhoeffer believed that the only way to combat stupidity is through spiritual and moral renewal, not through intellectual arguments, since stupidity is not simply ignorance, but a deeper issue of surrendering one's moral agency. The solution requires restoring people's sense of responsibility and fostering independent thought. And that can come through Jesus Christ. Okay, so I have a series. Just wait a minute.
Just one little comment on that.
Bingo, you were nailing it. Okay, that's what I was wondering, because you suggested this, brother. I wasn't sure if we're going to get it right, so that's good. I got his stamp of approval. Now, this is where we get a little more interactive, and I'm going to ask for you guys for some of your responses on this. Not that you already haven't. You can give great responses so far. But we're going to look at some of the quotes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer and respond to those. And I want to get your insights. The guy is not, he's not like writing gospel here. This is not flawless. He can make mistakes in his thinking. We can all make mistakes in our thinking. So this is not scripture than going over. But I would like to go over some of the things some of his quotes. And this is the first one. It says, cheap grace is the grace that we bestow on ourselves. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought out again and again. And here's the problem with grace. This might really rub some in Reformed theology or Calvinism a little bit raw in saying that we must respond. We must respond to the call. Just getting the grace by itself is not sufficient. He called the disciples, and the call that we were talking about earlier ended up not very nice for them.
Well, you also had comparisons there, because you had some of the ones they called. You had Peter, you know, come, I'll make you fisher of men, and then you had the rich young ruler who came up, who was not willing to respond to the call. It was there. He said, "Oh, great, you did it, fantastic. All you have to do, go sell your wealth, give it to the poor."
Yeah,
and that would proceed that he might have been the 13th at that point, but he chose not to.
Yeah,
he did not respond.
So Diedrich talks about three different people that came to Jesus about following him. And the rich young ruler was one, and there was the other one about taking his hand to the plow, and the other about burying his father. And he did a really good job, I think, of looking at each one of them and saying, this person is responding with this attitude. This person is responding with that attitude, and so forth. And all three of those attitudes were wrong. And we don't have the time to go into them now, but if you have a chance to read the book, The Cost of Discipleship, I would highly recommend it. It's a good one. Then we have a comment. The stupidity is to be proud of ignorance and ashamed of truth.
Yes.
I think we're dealing with a lot of that now, and it's very easy for us to point our finger at another group and say, well, they do this. But I think we also need to keep the guard up to say, we are also vulnerable and can't do this. Another quote that he has, and I want to get your response on this, was, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die.
Yeah, that'd be right. Die to himself. Even if we are not martyrs ourselves, that call is still there to die to yourselves and live for Christ.
You know what? He did not really follow the Carnegie School of marketing here. You don't want to tell your customers, yeah, come in here, you're going to die.
Well, I mean, even the whole thing with the disciples, right? That is not a very good sales pitch.
No, but
look at the best of the disciples. These are ones that walked with him. What happened? They all died. Horribly.
But when you look at it, there's so much better on the other side.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So much more to do. And the impact that these people made because they did choose this life.
Oh, no, they made the right decisions. It was what I'm saying is from a secular standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
It is a horrible sales pitch.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at this saying, well, Christianity is just all made up. There's something to be said by why, if it's all made up, it's got the worst sales pitch in the world, yet there's a lot of people who follow it.
Yeah. And I think it kind of makes sense, at least from Christ's point of view. People say, from a secular point of view, say that's terrible. Worst thing is somebody can die. Well, from Christ's point of view, from God's point of view, the life that we have here was not the original design, and it's pretty awful compared to what is to come and what should have been. So, yeah. Taking a look at comments here. I had a friend that always said, God wants to kill you.
Oh, if that was true, then you'd already be dead. You wouldn't be telling me this now, would you?
Oh my gosh, that's such
a stupid statement. It is
so awful.
God wants to kill you. Well, then he's a pretty sucky God because he keeps failing.
You know what? Our flesh needs to die on the cross.
That's true.
That is 100% what needs to die.
Dying to us and living for Christ. But if their statement is basically God's evil because he wants to kill us.
No.
That'd be a pathetic God because he can't really do it now, can he?
Well, you know what? He was willing to do it for us.
Oh, no. I'm not talking about the real God. I'm talking about this made up image that they're saying that God wants to kill you.
Yeah.
This made up God that wants to kill you. No. Then obviously that can't be God's intent, because if that was God's intent, you would be dead.
Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. I want to know what you guys think about this. We must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God. Peter. Must be allow ourselves to be interrupted by God. And we have talked about this one before in other ways when we said that our time is, what part of your life do you hold on to the most? Are you not willing to give up?
Your security. A lot of people, it's control. A lot of people, it's control. Control over what you're doing, control over where your life's going.
Yeah, specifically control over what is my question. What are we not willing to give up? Because control would be also possession. So if I had those possessions, they're mine. I have.
I'm specifically talking about the control over one's life. What is going to happen next? Be like, well, I'm going to work tomorrow. I got this plan for work. this is what I'm going to do. And then God comes in and says, no, here's my alternative. This is what you're doing. I'm
going to get myself in trouble for saying this. But there's a phrase recently that's become under a lot of emphasis or attack. My body, my choice. Me, my life. It's mine. Now, granted, God has given us our lives, and we are accountable to him for it in every way. But there's a level of selfishness there that's involved, especially when you're talking about the care of your own child. That's over the top. I would say that one of the hardest things for me to give up, to relinquish control over, to say it's mine automatically without even thinking that it's not, is time. It's my time. I've got to do this. I have all these plans. I need everything to come together, and it's time that I have, and I'm running out of time. Oh my gosh, I need to come together. And God says, wait, I have something else. And we have to be willing to say, yes, it's ours. Okay, another one.
Real quick, just building off of that for a second. Flip that around. So God owns all the time. He has complete control over all the time. You have to serve him all the time. Imagine how good it would feel if he, for 1 hour, said you can go do whatever you wanted to. You knew you had to serve him all the time, but here he says, go do whatever you want to do. Just for an hour, go do whatever you want to do. I'm looking back at Screwtape Letters. How the deception of my time was worked into there. How, you have all of it. By your works, you can't add 1 second to your life.
That's true. But, there's often does say, in fact, our entire life is do what you may. Do what you want. We have that issue there.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't, there's a question about how much God gives direction to every little thing. I mean, we're not talking about, micromanaging like Islam, go into the bathroom with a certain foot or whatever.
Yep.
Not talking about that at all. It's to love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that's your guiding principle. There's other nuances to that. There's depth that goes with that. You might have a direction and instruction from God for specific things. I believe that 100%. But generally speaking, that's our guideline, right?
Yep.
So another one that we have, and I want to see what you guys think about this, is silence in the face of evil. Just look at the sound of silence that we were talking about earlier. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Now, this was not a direct quote necessarily, but it's often attributed to Bonhoeffer, but it's not found in any of his works. It's paraphrased from Ethics, one of his books, Ethics. And that was published after his death in 1949. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God does not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And this is where standing up in the face of evil that's going on to say something about it.
Inaction is a decision.
Right. So I'm going to throw something out here. It's going to be controversial. And that is, you have Christians on the right here in the U.S. and in other parts of the world. You have people on the Christians that are on the left, possibly. What I'm saying is, you got two camps there. And they would both be pointing fingers at the other and say, but you're not doing this and you are doing this evil. You're not doing this good. You are doing this evil. Both are pointing their fingers at each other, these camps. And I think in some regards, the left might have a point to make, that if charity is not a part of our actions, it should be. Now, there's a lot of other things there that are really evil and bad that I would look at and say it's not good. But the question is, when is the right time to stand up and speak? Do you do it all the time? Do you choose your battles with it?
Listen to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, because if you do it all the time, you're going to be on social media just constantly a keyboard.
Blasting it out all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say jihadi, but that's not it. No. Keyboard apologist, just going. There's a point where Jesus said, if you go into talking to his disciples, you go into a town, they reject you. What do?
Dust off your feet and move on.
Yeah.
there's a certain point where you've got to just listen to the Holy Spirit, what his leanings are, where he's guiding you. At the same time, in order to do that, you need to know him. And that's where that relationship comes from. And that's where you need to spend time in the Word.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it this one or this one here?
That one would be next.
This one?
Down one.
That one. Okay, sorry. The people who say God can commit murder and genocide, like people who say that God commit murder and genocide. Yeah, God, a moral monster. We talked a little bit about that before, and I think we'll talk about it again. We
did that at one of our conferences, right?
Right.
We spoke on that.
Not this year, but last year spoke on Is God a Moral Monster, which is
a wacky, quacky interpretation.
No, it's a book here.
Does anyone in the comments know where that one comes from?
Is God a Moral Monster? Paul Coupon, really good book. If you get a chance to read it, I would suggest picking it up. He gives a lot of answers to, especially in the Old Testament. God says, wipe him out. He says some other things that look like, he's justifying rape. He's doing other stuff, rape and murder. And you got the picture of Abraham sacrificing Isaac on the front. All these actually look like, oh, how can that be? And we steer away and might even say, well, the Old Testament is just, it's not for us today or whatever. Yeah, this would be a good book to. Again,
Revelation is a lot more violent than actually the entire Old Testament.
Right. John Wick version of Revelation. Takes us back to Abraham and Isaac. There you go. He has to be willing to give up his son, the son of promise, that can ensure the future lineage that God had promised.
Yeah, but he kind of saw through that.
What's that?
Abraham kind of saw through the.
What do you mean?
Because he specifically told the people who were following him to the mountain, "Stay here. We will be back." When he took his son up to the mountain. He had faith that whatever happens, God's promise will come to pass. It just might be a little rough. Too bad he didn't realize that a few years beforehand, and a few months beforehand.
Right, with Ishmael.
Yes.
So some have speculated, we don't know what was really going through Abraham's mind at the time, but some have speculated that he might have even believed that if he dies, God can raise him from the dead.
Yeah, well, I figured he would. I don't know what was going through his mind. I mean, that could be a possibility.
I've heard, but I'm not 100% sure this is the case, that the mountain where this was done was Golgotha. That Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, and then, around 2,000 years later, God sacrificed his son in place there. So this is almost a prophetic message. And God provided the lamb, right?
Yep.
The ram that was in the thicket to do that.
Still, I'd be really nervous if I was the son. Hey, I'm up here. Where's that ram, Daddy?
Dad!
Where's that ram?
I got a bad feeling about this.
Dad, God will provide the ram. Why am I laying down here?
So Thomas is responding to, I believe, a comment we made earlier about knowing the time and place to speak up and act. In responding to Bonhoeffer's quote here, he said, "When would be the wisdom issue? Proverbs says a lot about speaking too quickly or too foolishly. Even look at Jesus. Jesus was very careful about what he said when, and he didn't reveal. I mean, could have gone there and been baptized by John the Baptist, come back up and say, 'Therefore, verily, I say unto you all, he who has ears to hear.'" I'm going to talk about soteriology, hamartiology, the doctrine of Christology, and we're just going to go through the whole thing here, guys. Propitiation, sanctification. Here it is, everything out. In about 3 years' time, I'm going to be crucified up there. So let's get ready. There's a short amount of time. I need to tell you everything so that you'll be ready for the next 2,000 plus years. No. He would have gone through with it, expected a resurrection.
Maybe, possibly.
I don't know.
I mean, he would have
God would have if that had gone through the case.
Well, I mean, in looking at from Abraham's point of view, he didn't have that point of reference. I mean, I don't know what pagan gods he had beforehand before he answered the call, but it's not like God was raising people from the dead in front of him.
You know what, though? That's almost an easy out for Abraham, because he says, "Oh yeah, well, this is going to hurt, son. This is going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt me." But then God's going to raise him.
That was really bad. So, I thought my walking to the gallows thing was bad.
You know what? That could have been the case. But then if Abraham said, "Oh, I read the end of this book. You're going to be resurrected," it's not going to have the same cost, because God said through your seed, right?
Yes.
And it could be like, well, Ishmael wasn't it? Maybe Isaac isn't it after? If God really wants me to sacrifice him, I'm going to have to go through with this. Maybe Sarah will have another baby.
Yep, there'll be some sort of provision.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that would have been because I don't think it's going to be a true test otherwise.
God provides.
God provides, yep. Absolutely. And early Christians also had problem of people getting themselves up to martyrdom too, willingly. They admonish believers to be prudent. Yeah, this is such a tough call on this. I mean, what do? You did have those believers that before Christianity was legalized in Rome, where they hid behind their decision. They said, "Oh yeah, he's not the Christ and everything," and practicing privately. And then those Christians trying to join the other Christians that actually had members of their family get killed because they stood up. That was a real tough time in the church to say, do we want these believers in? How are we going to handle this? Because, these are a bunch of Judases here. So, yeah, knowing when and where is a good point. So let's take a look at another proverb or another quote of his. He said, "Only he who believes is obedient, and only he who is obedient believes." This is out of the Cost of Discipleship. And this is another one of those things. Which comes first? Is it faith or is it works? Because that's really what he's talking about. It's a faith and works thing here. Only he who believes is obedient. It's got to be obedient, and then you believe. And then only he who is obedient believes. Well, which comes first, the chicken or the egg here?
Believes. Technically, in that sentence, it was first.
Well,
it was also that would occur, but you should also see the obedience along with it.
Right. When he calls his disciples, like, let's say Peter, he's out there fishing, or even Matthew's at the tax collector's booth. Come. Well, there's probably a level of faith there to begin with before Jesus is coming by. But which was it really first that came there? That's a good question. I think this is what when the Bible talks about faith built on faith, from faith to faith, that's what we're talking about, how it's a stepping stone, just walking with him. You get to this point where you may be like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and say, I'm going to give it all up. Where a few years earlier, when he first started his career, so maybe close to 20 years earlier, he was just going for the academics of it. He was not really following Christ. But it got to a point in his life, faith by faith, obedience, and faith, finally, where he got to that point where he could do this. Another quote that he had was, wrong screen. The other quote he had was,
okay. Everything went black for a second. I was like, oh,
hello,
crap.
Darkness, my old friend.
John just killed everything.
Okay, the church is the church only when it exists for others. Now, here he's talking on a corporate level, not just on an individual level. Is this true? Or is this guy, out to lunch? Is he a heretic? Does the church only exist as the church when it exists for others?
Well, if it's existing only for itself, it's not really being the church now, is it?
It has to do with the definition of the church. You look at 1 Corinthians 12, where it talks about, here are the gifts of the Spirit. For, chapter 12. Here are the gifts of the Spirit. Chapter 13. Done in love. Operation, motivation, love. Chapter 14. And everybody being edified. Everybody being built up within the church. In love. Okay? No one taking lording it over anybody else that's there. In that same method, in that same heart, we are giving it out to the world that's around us in the same way. So you're right. The church function is the operation for believers first. It really is for believers first, and then for outside the church as well. So ministry to God, ministry to within the church, and the ministry without, the threefold purpose of the church. So, yeah, that would be another one. How about religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Wait a minute, that's not Bonhoeffer. Where's that from? James. But isn't that a lot like this one here? The church is only the church when it exists for others. Well, that's kind of what this is saying. Right? How about this quote from Bonhoeffer? And that was our last one. Darkness. Okay. It was the last one. Sorry.
There's no more quotes?
I thought I had another one.
Hey, no quotes.
There were a lot of others originally that were in there, but I think that given time and everything else, that this would be a good consideration too.
So in other words, go read the book yourself.
I think so.
It's really worth your time.
Let's see. So I think this one here, this one on top. Nope, down. Thank you. Diedrich is such a great character in German World War II. Yeah. So now we've taken a look at his life in microcosm. There's so much more that you could read, so much more that you can look at. I believe, like I said earlier, this is supposed to be like a primer for if you're going to go see the movie. Do a little study on see who this guy is. Read The Cost of Discipleship, some of the other stuff that he read. And I think that you'll have a better understanding. There's a challenge for each of us in here too. It's not just the head knowledge here, but it's then how we would live our lives knowing that there is a great cost. It's not cheap grace. It's grace that costs something. Cost Christ his life. He came down. He did not need to. The second person of the Godhead did not need to do this. He chose to. And so when it comes to us to follow in his footsteps, we need to do the same. I like that. The church is the body of Christ. It is how we treat others that defines the church.
You'll know it's by our love.
And what do you guys think of this book on cost of discipleship?
That was kind of the point. One of the sections of this live stream.
I would say if you get a chance, rewind. We cover that. We also cover another thing that another one of his the theory of stupidity. We covered that, and there's other books that we touched on a little bit too. So that's all there, as well as his life.
Very well written book. Recommend it.
Absolutely. That
would be the shortened version.
There's also, I said, a book in the description that is a biography about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You can read that. That was also really well done, but that's also a much bigger book too. So if you get the audio version for that, yeah, dude, you're going to be cruising. I think there's an audio version for that. I think there is. You can put that in your car as you're going down the road and listen for quite a while. But it's well written. It's a biography about him.
So this, one of the things of doing this was in preparation for the movie coming up, right?
Absolutely.
So now we'll have to decide if Angel Studios got it right, or if they might have been slightly off.
It is. We can look at it with a little more knowledge now, but I'm not an expert on his life or character. So I wouldn't really be able to know. I recently read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. So there's going to be a lot of that I'd be looking at and say, okay, I'll check that out and see if that's right there or not. So when you get down to it, Dietrich Bonhoeffer had a lot to lose. A new wife, lifetime of contributions, probably maybe on the level of C.S. Lewis. We don't know. But instead of reading more of his books, we're left with a more dramatic footnote, a martyr who showed us the ultimate cost of discipleship. So next week, next Monday, this is going to be a change in time for us. And the reason why we're doing Monday, because it fits better with other people's schedules. Not just us. We're going to be joined by others to talk about the movie that's coming out, Bonhoeffer, and do a review fresh from the theater because it's coming out this Friday. So next Monday, we're going to have a review on it. I'm looking forward to it. If you guys,
looks great.
Yeah.
I mean, we just watched the trailer. It looked like a great trailer.
I believe so.
Might be the best movie of the year. Who knows? We'll find out.
Yeah, we're on the tail end. That would be hard though, because we have reviewed some really good movies.
I don't know, man. This one couldn't definitely. I've never given it a 10 out.
You've never given it a 10
I've
out?
never given it a 10.
Not even for. Wait, didn't you give it a 10 for Godzilla 1?
Nope, that was a 9.
-1. That was a 9.
That was a 9, and that was last year's anyway. That wasn't this year. That was
Yeah,
last
you're
year.
right. That was last year.
So I've not given a 10 on any movie that we've ever reviewed.
Wow.
We'll find out if this one has what it takes.
Yes. And absolutely. And we're looking forward to it. And hopefully you guys, if you get a chance to see it, great. And then join us next week for the review.
Who's all on the panel for the review?
You, me, Ryan, who has been a guest on this show before. I had invited David, but he's not going to be able to make it. Seth Wallace is going to be joining us, and possibly your wife.
Possibly. We'll find out.
Okay, so we're going to have the biggest group we have ever had here reviewing this together. It's going to be tough getting us on the screen. We're going to do different screens here and shots together, but it's going to be a bit of a party, all of us together. So hopefully we won't be talking over each other and be able to give a good review. I'm looking forward. It's going to be great. And until then, we will hopefully see you.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.